up a train, honey, with...
Good afternoon, my name is Andrew Whyte. I grew up here in beautiful southern Vermont. I went to Burton High School back in when it was Burton Seminary. And later on to Middlebury College in Middlebury, Vermont. I started hitchhiking a long time ago, back in 1996. And in 1997 began to hitchhike what would later become the bottommost portion of the Pan American Highway. The Pan American Highway is the longest highway in the world, extending from Homer, Alaska to the bottom of the island of Chiloé in southern Chile. And it took me a long time to kind of collect sections of this highway over the years. And finally I was left with only a gap between Quito, Ecuador and the Canal of Panama. And the reason that that section is tricky is because there is a section of about 180 kilometers between Panama and Colombia where the road doesn't exist. The road has never existed. And it's called the Darien Gap. You've probably heard of it. Last year, at the end of last year, I went down to Quito, Ecuador, returned to Quito, Ecuador to begin to hitchhike north up to until reaching the Darien Gap and then cross through the Darien Gap during the very first week of this year, essentially. Anyway, I've got a very limited amount of footage as far as the presentation of this cross. I only had one charge on my phone, which was an iPhone 5, so it came out to just short of 20 minutes of footage. And I welcome you here, well, to all of you, but especially those who might be curious about what it's like to cross through the Darien Gap. So, do you want to know what the Darien Gap looks like? So I've been living in San Cristobal de las Casas in southern Mexico for 6 months, waiting for the dry season. And in mid-December, I took a flight down to Quito, Ecuador, and began to hitchhike north through Colombia. 16 days later, I arrived to the town of Acandí. Okay, I've only shown this video a handful of times now, but I'm going to try to address some of the questions that keep coming back up. This is a little bit confusing because I was only going to turn on my phone once a day. It was in, as I said, I only had a single charge on my phone with no way to recharge it, and it was in a Ziploc bag. So my plan was to just take it out once a day, record what was going on. But this is at the very end of the first day. La Azteca is like a base camp where traditionally, you know, a bunch of immigrants and refugees had this huge camp, up to 1,000 people, only weeks before this happened. And because of a variety of reasons, including Christmas, including the guides, the Colombian guides going on strike for that period of time, the migration had moved north. There are 4 major paths that go through, and the migration had moved north. And so as I arrived to what I thought was going to be a camp teeming with immigrants from Cuba and Haiti and elsewhere, it was completely starkers. It was completely abandoned. Day 1 of Darien Gap. The migrant flow has been stemmed somehow. There's no one else on this trail. There are no Haitians or anyone else at all. I met a guide last night in town, thankfully, and he helped me make a map. I'm just going to stop here because I'm kind of proud of this map and I'm really glad that I was able to make it. The guide no longer was doing the trip, but he gave me some idea of some of the rivers that I'd be crossing. This is La Azteca, the base camp that I arrived to that first afternoon. And then basically the rest is just to get to the border of Panama. And this, he kind of tried to give me a kind of a 2D, a topo dimensions of all the climb. The climb the first day was just up, 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 and finally you get to the border, and then the rest of the entire journey is just following downriver. So So there's no real path, although there are paths on each side of the river, but there's always a wrong side of the river to be on or a right side of the river. I found out more about this later. But he said he's kind of retired or whatever. I've just gotten to La Azteca, which is kind of like the base camp. And all it is now is piles of garbage. And I mean, it's been a Haitian camp. There's books in French here. There's garbage everywhere. There's a guy over at the next, I don't really know that this is the main Azteca, but I'm just gonna relax for a little while. Oh, there's an old guy I met named Beep, who's maybe gonna come in the morning and guide me to the border. Yes, his name is not Santiago. It's equally as cool a name, but I have to protect this particular person's identity because he could be grabbed as a people smuggler, human trafficker. I said I'll wait for him till 7. We'll see how that goes. I hope he does come. But more on that later. Ciao. Just for the sake of... This is Wilson Martinez, who terrific guy, excellent friend. This is my guide, who I'm not sure if Wilson's wife already understood that he probably shouldn't be in the picture and did that on purpose. I was not aware that he was not in that picture, but I'm equally happy to have this one. Okay, so I'm in my jungle hammock right outside of Wilson Martinez's house. Late this afternoon, good old Senor Beep showed back up, and I'll have to write about this someday. Don't forget how he complimented that he saw my walking and that I didn't stop, and that I carried a machete, and he was talking about that tricky place up ahead. Anyway, tomorrow's the big day. I'll have to remember about how I lowballed them for $100 and was really nervous about whether he'd come, and I was so happy when he got here, and of course he already knows these guys, and I'll have to describe this guy so well and how he took his boots off and he has more socks, and we took the photo anyway. So good night. I'm going to try to get some sleep. We're leaving at 5 in the morning. Okay, I'm in Colombia. It's about 6 in the morning. Beep! It's about to show me to the border. It's going to take us all day. I'm going to Panama to the Darien Gap. It's raining. I think I'm about a mile from the Panamanian border. This clip, a mile from the Panamanian border, is actually the next statement, or the next second, really, from the very opening clip where it's, do you want to know what the Darien Gap looks like? This is when I was probably most kind of losing it on this trip, one of the moments, partly because my guide left when I was on my own, but more because you begin to see the travesty of what this journey has meant for so many hundreds of people. You begin to see what people are willing to just start to leave behind. And this will be a continuing theme, but it's not just garbage, which is everywhere, but it's like jewelry and rings and a gold-plated microphone and toupee and stuff that people generally would not want to part with. And whatever their situation that they were leaving, whatever country, these are amongst, especially as this trip progresses, these are amongst the things, the few things that people would have hoped to be able to preserve and make a new, arrive to a new life elsewhere with. And it's, they just give up on that right away. It's really sad. The path I've just come from, up until a few weeks ago, there's been groups of up to, well, not 1,000, but smaller groups of like 200, up to 200 groups of Haitians coming through at a time. And as I've gone, they just jettison everything because they can't carry it. It's just... Here's where I'm going. Look up between the two trees. It's bloody steep. Anyway, I'm getting close to the border, so my guide left about half an hour ago because he doesn't want to get grabbed by the forces. But I wouldn't have been able to make it this far without him. I won't go on about him because I'm gonna write a book about him. So, sorry. So it's starting to rain, so I really got to put the phone back away. But you can probably imagine I'm pretty happy about this. I put my stuff back on just so you can see what I'm carrying. I got this thing was mostly food, but now it's become my hammock because it's lighter. Got my backpack. I've had a stick for crossing rivers, and I got my machete. Got my rubber boots with a hole cut in the bottom so they drain. That's where I've come from, Colombia. That's why I'm going into Panama. Alright, well, I'm in Panama, but nobody knows it yet. I'll just mention that it took me most of this trip to really figure out why people take a machete with them into the jungle. I had always assumed that it was that Michael Douglas, you know, cutting the vines in front of you to be able to bat a way through, but I've quickly found out that if you're having to do that, you're going the wrong way. Machete, the first use of having a machete in the jungle is being armed. And the second is probably cutting these sticks that you use to cross rivers because they do break. And then far down, third would maybe be cutting brambles and vines, but you just go so it's such a slow going process to go that way that it's far preferable to just come up with some different idea. But if you're here, I'm down to the river, which is good news. I'm back in business for water, and this water is pure. However, along the banks is not. This is another like dump of people's possessions. You could fill a Walmart with just this, let alone everything that's been jettisoned along the way. As you know, well, I think I mentioned I lost my sandals in quicksand yesterday, but there's so many crocs here. So I've just found a right. I just got to go find a left. Shouldn't be that hard. And I want to try to get my feet dry. Next step is 3 hours down river to either where the Indians are going to spot me or immigration, whoever does first. But for now, I'm going to wait till tomorrow and do that fresh. I found a little spot, 2 trees where I can put the hammock up shortly. I've already got some sleeping mats underneath so I'm not stepping in garbage. And I probably should do the hammock first, but if it rains, I'm already completely sodden. So I think I want to get another croc and get out of these rubber boots. Alright, it's about an hour or a little bit more later. I got my hammock up. It's not really up perfectly, but it's hard to get any pegs in garbage, in a dump. I still haven't figured out the best way to go down river tomorrow, but I haven't really explored yet. I'm going to do that in a second without the phone. Anyway, so I'm sleeping on a garbage pile tonight. Good thing I have a hammock and not a tent. Downriver tomorrow, see if we can find the indigenous tribe. I can't actually remember the name, but I've got it written down. It's like on a Chondi, on a Chonda or something. I bet they spot me first. Okay, I've been following that river down for the past few hours. At least 2, maybe 3, including through some really sketchy canyons where the water was difficult. I had to get kind of in. And then I just came around the corner. I've kind of cut the corner here from the river, and I noticed that there was a pretty good path, and I took the path. And I just noticed up ahead, there's no smoke. Okay, so my phone cut out right as I was finding what I didn't really know what it was, but as I saw the first roof. I just wanted to note that this is now, like, since the end of day 2, beginning of day 3, this is the end of the map that I had. So I didn't know where else I was going, except for it becomes a lot easier going downriver because, as you know, all the rivers come together instead of forking apart. So, as you see, some of the advice I'm going to get now is just continue downriver for however many days, and it's all kind of going to take you to the first, hopefully, first signs of civilization. I'll also just mention that this first immigration border patrol, these guys all thought I was CIA. There was 4 of them. And that came up again and again. All of the military guys that I started to interact with as I arrived back all thought I was CIA.
End of day 3. My phone cut out right as I was making my first contact with what I thought was going to be some locals, but ended up being the border guard for them. They looked through all my stuff, and then they chewed me out for being here, and then they became kind of helpful and gave me some advice, but said there was going to be 6 or 7 days to get down to the nearest anything. So this river is my new best friend, and today's day 3, but they said 6 or 7 from today, so I'm going to keep that in mind. My campsite's a little bit nicer tonight.
Another valuable tidbit that the border guys kind of cued me onto is that the river, this is the dry season, so the river is oftentimes in the year a lot higher than this. And the garbage that's been in the river is going to get caught in the trees on both sides. So there's just garbage hanging from the trees. But these guys alerted me to the fact that not all the garbage is hanging. Some of it has got a half hitch. Some of it has been deliberately put there like a trail marker to let you know which side of the river to be on at any given time. Which, once you figure that out, it makes it a lot easier to figure out which side of the river to be on. But then sometimes you'd have to cross the river, and then you'd find the little trail marker to actually just be a piece of garbage stuck in the tree, and you go home on the wrong side of the river.
They told me not to use any of the camp spots that the Haitians have used for my own safety, but I'm sorry, I'm not going to go up into the jungle right now. There's my... And it's kind of behind what the Haitians have left anyway, so like, I haven't seen anyone all day except for the border guys. If someone were to come by, I mean, the boat can't go on this river, so I don't, yeah, anyway, this is where I am for the night. And yeah, I'm gonna have to be a little bit more chintzy on my food. 6 or 7 days. Today I got completely wet up to here, so my blanket got wet. I'm trying to dry it out. And hopefully the Ziploc bags work. Apparently this one does. Anyway, I'll check in with you tomorrow. Ciao. So I've just gotten past the hardest part yet. It was this rock climb direct up from water, which I couldn't have done with my bags. Luckily I had this rope, this kind of rope from my blanket, and so I tied all my crap.
When my friend, the guide, dropped me off at the border, he was an older gentleman, and he made me feel like I felt like Hemingway. And my interactions with this guy were all very simple and curt. And as he was going to leave me and go back to go down what is some of the hardest stuff I've ever climbed, and he is this old man. And I said, I knew it was kind of impolite, especially I felt like in Spanish it was more impolite, but I said, look, I'll regret if I don't ask you this, please forgive. Oh, how old are you? And he tells me, he goes, I'm 76. And he was just built like, I couldn't believe how many decades he'd been doing that. And he just made me feel like, not so tough anymore. Not so tough.
Strapped to the rope and the other end to my wrist, climbed up, and then pulled it up. And the rope didn't break, thankfully. But there's no other way to get past this part. The other side is kind of just as bad. There's ropes up here, but there's no ropes actually touching the water. I might change that before I go. Holy smokes. Day 4. It's coming on 4 o'clock. I'm gonna probably crash at the next place. It looks good. I think it's New Year's Eve. I'm not sure. Woo-hoo! Hello from Jungle Hammock. I start to get a little stingy on food because I've got 5 more cans of tuna, and about 5 chocolate bars, and 2 bags of Gorp. But if it's going to take me maybe 6 more days, But, oh, get ready for a treat. I found this at one of the Haitian camps. You know, it's like an anti-diarrhea thing, but all it really is salt and sugar. I'm pretty sure I'm gonna mix it up. Mix it up with 1 of my liters of treated water, and it's gonna be a big night here in the tent. I wish you were here to join me. Could have a party. Oh, getting towards the end of day 5. It's about 3 o'clock. I'm gonna take my 3 o'clock swim, and then see if I can maybe go another hour. Bugs are bothering me a lot today. I got stung also in the leg by something, I don't know what. I had to do some pretty dangerous stuff today. I'll just leave it at that. I found a cool ring. I also found a ring yesterday and a dog tag. And my belt is broken. And yeah, today's been a lot up in the jungle. I'm happy to be back by the river. That's about all I got for you. See ya. Yeah, I had to.
I'll just mention that I did take that 3 o'clock swim, and I was in the water, and I don't know, but all these little fish came and started nipping at me, which happens here in Vermont, I know sometimes too, but I was really thinking about like piranhas or whatever. And so when one of them bit me on the nipple, and I jumped out, so I jumped completely out of the water, and as I was like went up onto the shore, he was still holding on and flipping on my nipple. I was like, what?
I had to turn the phone back on for this. I just came up over this ridge. I mean, remember, I'm like 3, 4, 5 days from anywhere. And there's this cross for Alejandro Peña and Carlos Gutierrez. I'll have to Google that when I get back.
I mean, it's basically Bear Grylls without the cameraman. Am I right? Huh? These two guys that died, I did Google. I didn't even need to Google because I found out when I got to the base further down that they were Army forces. They were border guys, and that they had been camped out here 2 years before, and a huge tree had fallen on them.
And I don't know if it's halfway, but the whole place is littered with money. Everyone is, look at this, I'll turn the phone. It's mostly coins, but it's also bills. And like religious things. I don't know how much money would be here. Bibles. Every single country probably you could possibly imagine. It's kind of like what I'm trying to do on the nature trail. Times 1,000. Cool.
I was always keeping my eyes out for cats and tracks. Some of those to me look like dogs. I'm really not sure. I was taking pictures of the bigger ones that I saw. In addition to my little iPhone 5, I also had a one of those old-fashioned kind of disposable cameras you see at weddings, but it was waterproof, and that was, I think I had 22 photos on that. So it's spliced with real film photos if you want. Some of these scars I'm showing, or not scars, but cuts, kind of open cuts on my legs where the rubber boot touched. If I had to do it all over again, I would cut off about 1.5 centimeters on the rain boots every day, and then it, you know, it would rub in different places. I wish I'd started doing that earlier. I was doing that by the end.
Okay, it's day 6. And wow, my mind is kind of whirling. The landscape has changed. The sky's gotten big. Really different today. And again, you can go with the river if you can, or you have to go elsewhere. And I was elsewhere, and I got to a swamp, and everything was beep. And then I found this path, and I was going through the jungle, and then I came out of the jungle and got back to the river, and all of a sudden I could hear a motor. And then I didn't know whether to hide, and then I just waited and watched. And then I saw like a pole above the kind of horizon, and I was like, beep, they're close. And I wish I could have gotten the camera out on time, but the military doesn't really like cameras anyway. It was the military. There's 5 of them in one, and then a few minutes later, there's 4 or 5 of them in the next. And they knew about me. They'd heard about me from the reporting from the border guard. Anyway, they put me onto the shady side of the bank. They've gone up the river to drop off some of their guys, and then they tell me to just wait here for an hour, and they're gonna come back down the river, pick me up, and give me a ride to Bajo Chiquito. Bajo Chiquito, I guess, is the first village. I kind of think they were on the lookout for me, but they gave me the best treatment because they think I'm doing a documentary. So that's the best thing I could have said. I'll sign off because I'm running low on everything. And I'll talk to you soon. Hopefully maybe from civilization.
Just a quick note on the 2 kind of peasants who ended up giving me a ride back down the river. The military did not come back down and preferred that I didn't even mention them. And the 2 that brought me down to the first town, Bajo Chiquito, one was this fellow here, really nice older guy, and the other one was this Indian woman, and I don't mind calling them Indians because they call themselves Indians. And she was so primitive, I felt like I was in. She was talking to me like, so where are you from? You know, and she was like all these really unconventional, but she wasn't being rude, and she was really, really interesting. And she was asking me if I had been raided by any of but from the marauders in the Gap. And when I told her that I hadn't, she was like, wow, you're really lucky. And she said, because people come from other countries to prey on the migrants here. And I was like, other countries? I was trying to imagine that. I was like, other countries they're coming from? And she's like, yes, other countries here in Panama. And so I realized right away that her idea of what a country was and mine were totally different. She was a really interesting person to get her take on it. But it does seem, one of the ways I got lucky in this trip is that the marauders or what have you, the thieves, they've kind of followed the migrant trail up to the more northern route. And because I was coming in when no one was going through, and because of my chats with some of the locals and guys I was trying to find who could guide me to the border, I became aware that the migrant stream was then going to switch back to the one that I was on January 15th. And so I had that piece of knowledge going all the way through that nobody, even the border guards, even the Médecins Sans Frontières, and everyone's going, when are they going to come again? And I was going, they'll be back on the 15th. And like some of the villages there have become quite dependent on being able to sell inflated price items to even the most desperate of people going through. So they were actually happy that they were going to have the migrant flow again.
Morning. I'm in Bajo Chiquito now, where Raul and a woman brought me down to yesterday. I'm waiting to try to hitch a ride with the next boat that leaves downriver. Meanwhile, I'm being put up kind of by the army. And they've looked all through my passports, taking pictures, but no one can actually stamp me in. So hopefully I can get down to Lajas Blancas, and that's going to maybe take place. The first boat was going to go 6 o'clock this morning, but it is now maybe going to go at 11. And if not, the army might give me a ride down. So fingers crossed, maybe get to Lajas Blancas today. Maybe get checked into Panama, where I've been for almost a week. And from there, I think there's a branch that connects to the Pan American. We'll have to wait and see.
Comandante Flores actually assigned this boat to take me downriver so that I wouldn't have to pay for a boat, because he and I had shared now 36 hours of talking, and I was explaining that I was trying to hitchhike the entirety of the highway and that I couldn't pay for a ride. And so even though it seems like he was doing this as a hard-handed move, he was actually doing me an incredible favor. And as I left, I gave him that gold ring that I'd found in the Gap. And he joked, and he went like this, and he goes, "Has it got a GPS?" Also thinking I was CIA still. And I was like, "No, buddy, no GPS." In the not confusion, but in the impatience of trying to sign all these forms, and they'd given me, they'd take me to the clinic and give me COVID tests and all this other stuff. One of the forms that I was asked to sign had my name spelled incorrectly. It had an R on the end of my apellido, my last name. And I probably should have said something, but I just didn't think anyone was even going to see that piece of paper again. I signed it, and then that was reason for once we got to Lajas Blancas downriver, the more high-ranking official was furious. He was furious, and that was some or all or none of the reason that they decided to throw me into immigration camp, which came to me as a huge surprise.
So there was an error in my clerical work, and I've been chucked in an immigration camp for the night. Hopefully just for the night. I'm working through it.
This being in the immigration camp, even though it was only for a day, was probably the most interesting part of my trip in a way. I was a little bit frightened when I first got put in, but after kind of assimilating a little bit, everyone became super friendly. I was the only Westerner who had been thrown in there with a bunch of Africans and Venezuelans and Cubans. And everyone wanted to tell me their story, and so I became like, I don't know, it was crazy. And I did manage to get up the following day. I also wrote to, the only time in my life I've written to the U.S. Embassy, and I'm a little bit sorry to report that I didn't hear back from them for 9 days, although it was an emergency email type situation. But I did end up, well, I'm getting ahead of myself.
Okay, it's not a stamp in the passport, but it's as good as I'm gonna get. That's one of the harder ones that I've ever had to get. I've still got to go to Panama. I've got now an appointment in Panama to get maybe a stamp in the actual passport. That involved an overnight locked up in an immigration camp, and also involved the presence and go ahead from a general of the Panamanian Army.
That general was General Espinosa. I've written about this situation this one day in an article. I am writing about this experience. It's going to come out in a book in the next year or so. It's going to be called just Through the Darien Gap. I was here 2 years ago promoting my first book called Rule of Thumb, which had everything to do with hitchhiking. I believe I also mentioned my, as of yet, failure to have accomplished the entire highway because of the Darien Gap. So this is kind of, in my mind, it's kind of a follow-up. But keep your eyes out for my book. It's out there. Rule of Thumb is also available here in town at the North Shore Bookstore or on Amazon.
Holy, but I'm free now and I'm in Panama. See you in Panama City. Hi, it's like a week later. When I went into the migration office in Panama on Monday, it was closed because of some strange holiday. On Tuesday, I went back in and they said I was going to have to pay a $1,000 fine for irregular entry into the country. But they let me write a handwritten letter to the director of migration, a woman. They gave me her name and they sent it to her. Then I've been hanging out in Panama all week. Today's Friday. I went back in today, this morning. They told me to come back at 1. I went back at 1 and had this very long 2 legal page document from the minister woman, which I think is gonna get me into Costa Rica, fingers crossed. I don't know what else, but I didn't get fined. So hopefully that's the epilogue, and hopefully I'm gonna get into Costa Rica. I'm on the way to David right now, and I'm looking forward to getting out of Panama.
This closing sequence where I'm cracking myself up is just a joke to myself, but I'm told, my kids tell me that no one's ever going to get it. but I challenge you to get it. It's a song. It's a song.
This horse has no name. We've just come through the desert together. It didn't rain at all. It didn't rain at all. Thanks for coming back through with me on my journey through the Darien Gap. If you want to find me online, I'm available at Cool Hand Drew on Instagram, or come check some of my music on YouTube.
Start a song.